Hi, guys. Thank you so much for joining us again in the second episode. I'm joined by Brenden Connolly, and we are going to be diving into some interesting subjects. I think mainly critical thinking. We're just trying to see how the mind works and how we are informed every day by little things and how we think about them. So, yeah, stay
Thank you.
tuned as we
Thank you,
dive in.
Ricardo. Thank you. Thank you.
Maybe just give us a backstory of what you do and who
General
you are,
background
and
of who I
yeah.
am. Well, born and bred Durbanite. Have lived in and out of the waves of Durban for most of my life. But yeah, there were periods where I was away, other parts of the world. Blessed to have travelled multiple different places. My career and my training and my experience has been very eclectic and broad spectrum, from hospitality to fine art and drama to counselling, as you know. There's quite a wide range of experiences involved. I am very much a person for life experience. I got my first tertiary qualification a couple of months ago, so that's quite a at the age of 54, that's quite an achievement of avoiding tertiary education. Not that I avoided it, I just never completed it. So, and I got my first completion, 6, 7 months ago, which is a huge feather in my cap. So I'm very chuffed with it. And yeah, love the surf, love rugby, love Durban, even in all the humidity and the heat. I really do like it. I'm blessed to have walked parts of the world that other people might not have walked, like the Etosha Pan, Okavango Delta, Southeast Asian islands, down in Punta Arenas in southern Chile. So, I've had quite a lot of good exposure, very blessed. And yeah, I've, one way or another, always believed God is at the center of it all. Haven't exactly been the best example, but then the question is, who is really a brilliant example other than Jesus? So, and it's one day at a time for me. I used to be in the rat race. I stepped out of that about 8-10 years ago, and it's been eye-opening changes in my life that's happened in that time period. So just a general overview.
Yeah, general overview.
Yeah.
Sounds like a really full life. I mean, you mentioned places that I don't think I've actually ever heard of, like, and yeah, that's cool that you've had those experiences, and you maybe think they've um, shaped you in some way.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I grew up in apartheid South Africa as a privileged white boy.
Mm.
Went to a bourgeoisie school, and Glenwood would hate me for saying this, but I'm green machine through and through. So I grew up in Glenwood, and we were privileged. We did have all the good stuff, and it was a good life. It wasn't easy. We had our difficulties. I was, the only son of a single mother,
Yeah.
and in those periods, single mothers were frowned upon, and they were treated differently.
Yes.
But it contributed to how I grew up,
Yeah.
and fortunately, my mother, being the international academic that she was, she exposed me to things that I know lots of other kids didn't get exposed to.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate. While I had the privilege of being white, I actually grew up in the likes of KwaMashu and Phoenix and all the rest, because my mom worked in those areas as a teacher within the Indian and black communities. So I ran around as a white boy anti-apartheid, which was quite funny. Walking down Grey Street in the 1980s was easy for me. Everyone knew me because of my mom. So I was the odd one out, as it were.
Yeah.
And I didn't mind it, because I got to see a different side of the world. And it was a privilege, And yes, I did it from a privileged position. I do recognize that. And yeah, these days it's about, what can I pay back? How can I pay it back? I have been very blessed in my life, so that's where my counseling comes in. It's about being able to just listen to people's stories, help them find their interpretations, and find their best routes. It's
Yeah.
not my answers or anybody else's; it's theirs.
Yes.
But helping people process that and come to terms with what they like and what they don't like and what they do want to do and how they go about doing it becomes really critical for me. So yeah, that's where I'm from.
That's cool. So, Brendan, we always have these like conversations. I do want to get into that a little bit. We always have these like mind-bending conversations where you end up just going, huh? Like, really? Huh? And then, I mean, and the beauty is that like I don't often find the answers, but it just takes us along this journey of thought. And then you start to like really like seep into the roots of the mind, and like you're trying to catch a truth that you can't really catch, but in the running, in the journey of trying to discover, you find that there's like little nuggets that you sort of like cling on to. And I know you like doing this, I like doing that. Tell us a little bit about that, like what
I think it stems out of what I was talking about where I grew up. We grew up in a very controlled, routine part of the world where you like queued up to step into a classroom.
Yes.
That the school assembly every morning was at exactly the same time and exactly the same subjects were covered, and
Yes.
and everyone behaved in a very, very strict way. And if you stepped out of line, corrections were made. And
Yes.
those are the days of you'd get the best of six.
Yeah.
So that sort of killed free thinking or critical thinking, because it was a case of you literally had to regurgitate parrot fashion what you were given to be successful. Okay, and for anyone who, like myself, who was slightly exposed to alternative ideas, like I said, I grew up in the likes of Phoenix, of Kwamashu, of Amlazi, etc. You kind of started saying, but that's not what I'm used to.
Yes.
And you quickly learned you couldn't actually raise the questions.
Yes.
Because it brought out the ire of the masters.
Yeah.
And to actually say, well, this is wrong, or shouldn't we be thinking about something like that, didn't actually sit well with anybody. So that spirit of questioning, of just innocent, why can't it be different?
Yes.
Is there a better way to do something? Just got demolished. And I even today I find where things are a lot more centrally orientated and a lot more equal. They're not quite good yet. We've got a long way to go in that aspect, but they are improving. There is still this dogma of destroying free thought and critical thinking, and being able to let people explore things that have probably been explored a million times over the millennia of humanity, but it brings about new ideas. And, we call it critical thinking, and lots of people turn around and go and say, well, critical thinking is about being obstructive and destructive.
Yes.
And I'd say, no, it's not.
Not necessarily.
I'm not an expert, but the reality is, for me, critical thinking is about growth.
Yes.
It's about finding an alternative.
Yeah.
It's about looking for something different and dealing with the uncomfortableness that brings.
Yes.
Because, you get given a specific idea, and let's take a very simple idea of the idea of freedom. A very simple definition of it is that there's no care.
Yeah.
And for me, freedom isn't about not having cares.
Yes.
It's about being able to be critical of myself and my actions and take responsibility for those actions. I'm not very good at it all the time. I don't think any of us are perfect at it.
Yeah. No.
But it's a growth process. And you've got to be able to challenge your ego. Why do I believe this? Is it because it's the way I was brought up and I blindly followed my parents? Is it because it suits me to believe it? Is it because I like it? And it's about challenging those things so that we can actually see, well, yes, I like it, but it's not exactly true, is it?
Yeah.
And being able to challenge that and find out what the truth is and then use that truth positively. That's where critical thinking becomes important for me, is to be able to listen to someone or listen to something and go, yes, but.
Yeah. And that is healthy. Do you think, because the thought I'm getting is that um, I'm realizing as well with myself, like having an experience or like having a childhood that enables you to be in different pockets of communities allows you to have this sort of open mind where your dreams are more than just a community you come from, and your understanding and aspirations are more than just a community you come from. There's generally like a conformity amongst a community, and it's just the way we do things. It's just the way we do things. And once you step out of your own comfort
Yeah.
zone and like you find yourself in a different community, especially as a child, you start to like learn different ideas, and then it shapes you in such a way as an adult where you always like, yes, but yes, but there's a different way of baking a cake. There's a different way of and all of that. And so you've created, or you become, this cocktail of different parts,
Yes.
and you have this unique way of thinking. And yes, it is important for us to challenge the way we've been trained to think, because we have been trained to think a certain way. It's the reality, and it's not harmful, but it's just the reality. And it is important for us to sit and go, hey, are there any other ways I could possibly do something, rather than just all your life going at something in one way, and
Yes.
never really exploring other ways to like learn, or exploring other ways to like recreational stuff.
Yeah.
Like there's so much that, because you find that if you go to a different community, like for instance, Ekamalak is where I'm from, Poughkeepsie.
Yeah.
Like the things we did for fun, extremely different
Yeah.
to
No, absolutely.
how children have fun here in Durban, for instance. And then even closer to home, like how children will have fun probably in Kloof.
Yeah.
They might ride bicycles just outside the fence, but you find that like closer to the city here, children may not like be outside and riding their bicycles. So, and that influences how your worldview and how you think the world operates.
Absolutely, I can testify to that and I agree with you, Ricardo. It is your societal influence, your community. I'm a single dad, but there's a whole community that raises my kid.
Yes.
Okay, and it's not necessarily community that I want my kid to be raised by.
Yes.
He has to interact.
That's deep.
He has to interact with certain people, and I'm like, no, but okay, let him go, let him experience. And the fear of a father not doing the right thing kicks in. But that is what I'm talking about. And I can speak of this when I get your idea from where you grew up to where in Durban it's changed. I can testify the same thing as growing up as a teenager in an all-boy, white boys school. We used to break the rules and bunk out and go to parties, and generally would be parties where there were no parents around and there was booze flowing around. Somehow someone had laid hands on a whole copious amount of alcohol, and people would drink far too much, and that was a party. That was considered fun.
Yeah.
And then in '89, I had the choice of going on exchange to South America, to Chile, where in the community that I was ingrained into, my host father was a policeman within the Chilean police force, who at the time were considered one of the most brutal police forces. They made the old SAPS look quite small and quite tame, quite honestly. And he was a beautiful man, but very, very strict. And I was 18, and I was male, and I was told, take your older sisters, because I was the youngest of the young adults, take your older sisters to the party, you the chaperone. My 26-year-old host sister was not allowed to go to a party unless I went.
Without you.
Because I was the male chaperone.
That's cool.
Okay. And the parties were different. It wasn't about alcohol. It was about get on the dance floor and express yourself musically. And that's what I was exposed to.
Yeah.
Okay. And yes, it did change my bourgeoisie perspective from between 18 and 19, up until 18. Party for me meant going to a party and watching people get pissed drunk. Excuse the language, but that's what it was. And get to Chile, also at the time, a very oppressed society because Pinochet had been a dictator for close on 18 years.
Yeah.
And you get to this party and everyone is dancing and expressing themselves, very Latin American structures, and it was really awesome to be exposed to it. But I started taking on that attitude, that freedom of expression in terms of how we move our bodies.
Yeah.
And I brought it back to South Africa, and I come onto the club floor, and all my ex-schoolmates are putting back their second brandy and coke, and I'm doing the solo cueca on the floor. They're going, "What's this funny dance you're doing?"
Yeah,
and I'm saying it's commemorating the lost people from the Chilean Revolution, the lost children, because there were, just like in apartheid, there was massive social segregation that was taking place in Chile and abusive structures. So there was a duality almost in my life of experience, and looking at top subjects such as discrimination and segregation from a totally different perspective. In South Africa, it was the black and white apartheid structure. In Chile, it was classist. It was about the military versus the rest of the country.
Especially in the
but it was functionally the same thing. It was a minority ruling over, but it was a totally different perspective. And that was a learning curve, and it was a great experience. And that's where we've got to let go of our egos when we're trying to deal with the topic of critical thinking.
Yes.
Letting go of what we think is important, and that worldview that climbs underneath, that you brought up, that climbs up out of the doldrums of your experience, your life experience, and starts dictating how you behave and how you think. And you've actually got to go, no, I've actually got to let that go, as it were, and consider someone else's idea as possible.
Yes.
So, yeah.
That's true. And, I mean, can I just say that with the 26-year-old sister going to the party with you, I don't think that would happen nowadays, like at all. I think there would just be like not a chance. And then you mentioned something about your son and how he's raised by a community, whether you like it or not. And like there's really something in there. And I've written something around that, funny enough. But I think I was just doom scrolling, obviously, and I came across this reel. I don't remember who the lady was, but she was just talking about child laboring and how important it is for parents to correct child labeling.
Absolutely.
So I'm gonna read a little bit here of what I wrote, my thoughts. So it goes: be mindful of how your child is labeled by others, whether it's by a stranger or even by family. Don't let it happen. Correct people when they label your child. For example, if someone says, "Oh, that child is shy," you might say, "No, he's not shy. He's simply observing and hasn't yet built the trust of his environment." Right? This way, you reshape the perception of your child instead of allowing an identity to be embroidered onto them. Children are very impressionable, and they may start to believe these labels, so it's important to gently correct them and offer a more empowering perspective.
Absolutely.
Like,
that's the power of the word, isn't it?
Yes.
It's the power of the word over us.
I think as adults, we're not very mindful of how we conduct ourselves, especially around children. Children are super impressionable. Like I know because I've been a child, and I know I've been impressionable. Like I'll watch like someone and I will want to be like them, and I want to say the things that they say and do the thing. And then, yes, there were moments like in school, especially. I remember there would be like, those guys that sit at the back, and the teacher would just be like, oh, they're just rascals or whatever. And they become that. They become full
Absolutely.
fledged that,
Absolutely.
And I think just carefully nudging and redirecting every time you are present in those moments really helps a child formulate its own identity in a healthy way,
Yes.
rather than just being told by random people and random strangers because of one mistake. Like, picture this: like a child is walking into a convenience shop, going to buy something, and they forget to pay for it. They like maybe leave, right, without paying for it, and then they get called in back by the manager, and then everyone's going, "Oh, you're a thief! You're a thief!" You know, they forgot. And because they're a child, maybe they started and they don't have the words to describe what just happened, and you possibly even there, and now they live with that consideration. Could I actually be a thief? Is
Yes.
it possible that I'm a thief? And they wear
They
that,
take
and
that
there's so
value
much
on.
shame, and like,
Yeah.
and then like, there's cases where they actually become that because of that one instance. It's so embarrassing, so overwhelming, and to see adults label you as something, well, they have to be right, because adults generally in my life are right. They give me the food, they go to work, they build the house, so maybe they are right.
You're 100% right. I can't express it more than to say it happened to me. I was this very demure, gentle person. Well, not gentle, but I followed the rules.
That
I
word
made
is
sure the
trending, by
rest
the
of the
way.
world. I made
Demure.
I made the rest of the world believe that I was a good little boy.
Yes.
Okay, but in the background, I was rebel number 101. Every weekend, find a way to get out of boarding school, down to the beachfront, into bars that no longer exist, and learn about the facts of life as a 14, 15-year-old, and older. And when I was playing rugby in my early days, I was a lot smaller than I am today. I was actually quite a small kid at school, but I had this, I don't know, you call it tenacity, determination, that I wasn't going to let the big boys beat me down.
Yeah.
So the smallest guy in the team would go into the mall and rip the ball out and come out the other end, and I'd do it differently. And I wouldn't be trying to use my body strength to literally disarm someone. I would get my hands into the right place in the middle of the mall and wait for the opportune and then rip. Yeah. And I adapted to my environment. But because of the way I did it, I very quickly got the nickname Animal. Okay, and I didn't think much of it, but on the rugby field, that's Animal Conelly. You want the ball, tell Animal Conelly to go fetch it, because that's what happened. But unfortunately, that stuck with me, and I started owning the name.
Yes.
Okay, and when it got into the clubs, etc., in my early 20s, I used to get into conflict. Quite honestly, get it. And
keep the reputation going.
Well, whether it was to keep the reputation or maybe just juvenile arrogance more than anything else, and stupidity, a lot of stupidity. And I'd get into these brawls, and everyone would expect a hands up box type thing. Conelly's never been that type of fighter, because I didn't have a father to teach me to box. I had to teach myself, and it would be scratch hands, needs bite. So guess what name stuck with me? Is Animal. He fights like an animal. I wasn't proud of it, but it's a good story to tell. And in terms of what you're asking and describing, it literally takes. I took on that identity into my adult life, and when I went and did my military service, my lieutenant turned around and said, "You can be an absolute animal sometimes." This title just seems to have followed me around.
And maybe you were also portraying that.
Yes, because I'd taken it on for so long, I'd started living it, and I was actually quite proud of this. Okay.
And do you think that maybe there's a sense of, or maybe this is like, this is
who I am. This is my identity.
This is probably the ceiling for me. I need to be this. And because this is how the world views.
Spot on. And you see, and this is where I would like to take the idea that, yes, children are impressionable, okay, and we've got to be careful about how we use naming structures around them. But exactly the same rules apply to ourselves as adults.
As adults, yes.
Okay, it's not just at child level.
Yeah.
It carries on through our entire life. Now, does that mean we've got to be super polite and woke, as it were, in terms of not using all the correct terminology?
Yes.
Absolutely not. Okay, we've got to live life.
Agreed.
We've got to get on with it. But it is important to be observant and aware of what your words can be doing. Yes, in a young person's life, I couldn't agree more with you. We have to be more conscientious about it because we're setting the example.
Yes.
And if they've learned that example from the way we've set it, they're going to teach it to their children that way. And that's where critical thinking becomes important. It becomes about
yes. I want to get into that.
Do I actually follow in my mother's footsteps of being a single parent and desperate to get me to embrace some real morals? So she was heavy-handed with me. Do I love her less? No. You know, but I have been considerably less heavy-handed with my son because I didn't enjoy having my old lady clap me when I was 50.
Yeah.
Okay, in a public area. And is corporal punishment necessary? I'm one of those people that says yes, because it defines a ceiling of where discipline should be maintained.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I'm not one that says you must go around and clap every single kid.
Yeah.
But you have to have a ceiling of definition to say this far and absolutely no further.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I get it. Like I mean, I do get it. I think it has a part to play in shaping a child. I do think the reason why it's such a difficult subject is, here's what I think, is that you are taking generally broken adults as it were, broken adults that have a broken bias compass, you know, and sometimes there are situations where it is an injustice to the child more than it is something that will help them.
Yes.
And so it gets very murky, and it's hard to police that across all schools and go, oh, she's doing it for the right reason, or he's doing it because he just doesn't like the rascal that sits at the back. And then it makes it a little bit difficult to just, you know. So I get why it's such a difficult subject to begin with. Like, because like I remember, like in school, I went to an Indian school in primary school, and like we used to get clapped. Like there was this, I was just telling the story like a while ago. There was these pipes that they had, and they would whack you on your or they take the duster and make you like
clip your fingers together,
like that. And we actually started noticing a trend. Like, why is it always just us? And when I say us, I mean like black guys that are getting whipped like this, you know? Is it really the case that none of the Indian kids are like rascals at all? Like, you know, like you sit down and then because you see that happening so much, you start to wonder actually if we as black children, if we are actually rascals. And then we actually become that, because there's it feels like there's a perpetuation of, you know?
It is. You're quite right. It is not corporal punishment or any form of correction. You see, people, I've got to be very careful here because I am very outspoken about this, but people are very critical of corporal punishment, okay? But then in the same breath, we ask the question, why did someone a 15-year-old, pull out a sword and go chop up a whole lot of people in a school? Okay, is it because there wasn't discipline? Possibly. Is it because of their lifestyle that they were exposed to?
Possibly.
Yes, absolutely. There is a world myriad of issues involved in that poor child's life. Okay, but the thing about corporal punishment is it does set that ceiling. Okay, and correctly applied, it helps the child understand that this is my scope of boundaries in which I need to operate. Okay, now correctly applied.
Applied, yeah.
I've witnessed corporal punishment being applied to a 7-year-old for the first time and the last time in that 7-year-old's life. 10 years later, you ask him, where does the discipline come from not to be tempted by the wrongdoing of his peers? He said, because the clap I got from my dad when I was 7 years old.
Yeah.
Okay. That is an example of possibly where it has been applied correctly.
Yeah.
Okay. Does this make children compliant? Incorrectly applied? Yes, you've just described it.
Yes.
Okay. Where a group of people incorrectly subjected to it get an idea of, oh, that's the way we're going to behave, so let's behave. Now, personally, that's exactly what I did. I made sure I was the goody two-shoes, and no one really saw me get hidings. But I got hidings regularly from the masters. I just made sure I did it in private.
Yeah.
They'd call me and I actually said right at the beginning to the headmaster, I don't want to be called out publicly. I'll accept my punishment, but you don't call me out publicly.
Wow.
Yeah. And he agreed to it.
That's
Okay. Because we had a conversation about it, and I said, I've done wrong, you're going to correct me, but you don't publicize it. Okay, you publicize it, I'm going to rebel even more. I won't bother coming to your office. Okay, but that was the nature of my upbringing, the nature of who I was, and I became very manipulative. So this is where corporal punishment can really backfire on itself.
Yes,
because I became manipulative of the system, didn't I?
Monsters.
Yeah, I was literally I'd bunk out, I'd get caught. Okay, go to the headmaster's office because you've got special dispensation. Okay, off I go to the headmaster. What were you doing, Brenden? No, I went out jollying last night. You know you're not supposed to. I'm tired of school. So, I was in boarding school. Okay. And I go, okay, how many? I said, you're the judge and jury.
Yeah.
Okay. And he said, okay, bend over 6 today. Okay, cool. 6. And a number of times he stopped offering me the alternative of detention. I'd rather take the corporal punishment. Okay.
Yeah.
Get it over and done with, and get on with life. Okay.
So you could live with the consequence, and therefore, because you can predict the consequence, you just went as full-fledged bad behavior, knowing that this is just what's going to happen, and then I can move on with life.
Now
and
you
do
see
it again
how the system's broken.
Yes.
Okay, that you alluded to. It's broken in so many different ways. Okay, so this is where I honestly believe, yes, I understand why the laws are there for corporal punishment to be banned. And in a way, I actually agree with it, because not every single adult has the competence to adjudicate it correctly and apply it correctly. Absolutely. But we have the perfect example that it is necessary. And I'm going to be biblical here. Yes. It's Jesus in the synagogue.
Yeah.
And there's an adult taking a cat and nine tails to a bunch
of
adults. Right. And correcting them because they had gone beyond the acceptable limit. Yeah. Not in my Father's house. Okay. So it's a very difficult and contentious thing. And this is where critical thinking becomes important. Yeah. Because it's not about saying that's wrong or this is right.
Yes.
It's about saying, okay, what if? And then we can talk about bad experiences and good experiences. Use biblical reference, use other empirical reference, science, to actually find a different way of doing something.
Yeah.
And embracing that.
Yeah. And I'll say this, like, personally, like, my mom used to, like, whip me, like, and my uncle, like, there was, like, you would know, like, and in the black community, like, they take out the belt, you see it, there's like a build-up, there's a build-up, you know what you did, and then there's just, you see your cousins and your sisters just go, like, that it's coming, and there's, like, like a tradition, so, like, I think it brings about this feeling of, like, this is not out of anger or, like, out of, you can see there's a sequence or a pattern of events that leads up to the whipping, and you don't want to live through that again. So it shapes you in a way. And I want to say that I think that added some value into my life personally, right? I do. So that is to say, I get it. I get it, and to some degree, I agree. Like, there should be some kind of whippings handed out so that children can stay.
They learn their boundaries.
Narrow path.
They learn their boundaries. They learn what is acceptable in terms of. You see, that's the issue, isn't it? Because as a critical thinker, I can go and say, what am I limiting here? What is my purpose? What am I trying to achieve in this action? Okay, And that's where the system broke, because people were not considering why corrective corporal punishment was being applied. It was just the system of, okay, it's 2 hours detention or it's 2 cuts.
Yes, and that's I think why I think now I go, despite my beliefs and despite I get why the government goes north, because
Absolutely.
now you're left with a system where, like, firstly, you can't police it well. You don't know the intentions and the biases of the people applying it.
Right.
So for me, it's better to correct or protect the injustices that could,
Right.
even if it's minority of children that experience that,
Yeah.
to have children abandoned to a world where there's a system that enables maybe an abusive person to lash out on a
100%.
child. I would much rather, like, we create other systems, like maybe like verbal correction and like how we see now, like
It's
what,
about
quiet
consequence,
corners and
isn't
stuff.
it?
Yeah.
It's about anybody, being it a child, an adult, a teenager, a young adult, learning that freedom comes with consequence.
Yeah.
And that consequence has to be owned. Okay, so I sit here as a middle-aged white male, okay, and I talk about the idea of corporal punishment having its value. But I've got to be very careful of that, because, as you've already alluded to, in a broken system, it allows a pedophile to really get nasty,
And get their way,
and get abusive. It also it takes away from its real purpose, which is about getting children, adults, to understand that there's certain moral levels that you just don't break.
Yeah.
You don't get. So yes, we go look at it a different way, and we look at behavioral structures and narrative and other psychological formats, and they all have their value.
Yeah.
Okay, but there like in every society, there is always that group of people who do need the extreme representation.
Yeah.
Okay. And I say this very gently, because who adjudicates that? Who actually says you actually need extreme correction? Okay, and that becomes a very murky place, because it relies on a broken human system to actually determine that.
Yes.
A broken human system run by broken humans.
Who are having a bad day, probably.
Right. Okay. So it's back to what isn't broken, and that's spiritual relationship.
I like
isn't it?
that. Yeah.
What isn't broken? My relationship with God is not broken.
Yes.
Okay. He seeks me, I seek him. Okay. And if I start working from that which is not broken, I start having an opportunity of moving into a discernment structure which allows me to go to an extreme if it's need to be, okay, but also prevents me from going there.
Yeah. Oof.
More than I should.
Yeah. It's kind of like that thing you described of like the knowing how powerful you are, or like, and then the freedom.
Yeah.
I know I can, however I choose to. Like, freedom kind of looks like responsibility at the end of the day.
It is responsibility.
more than recklessness.
Yes.
Which, in broader terms, to many people, it might be perceived as recklessness, or like, I'll just do whatever, right? But when you really look into the depths of the true meaning of freedom, what if it looks completely different? What if it looks like so much responsibility and accountability?
Well, for me, the fallacy or the deception of freedom is the idea that I don't have to care. Okay, that I can do as regarded, and if I'm going to follow that very, very anarchist type thought, then I've got to make the assumption that it's okay to be anti-Christ, as it were, or anti-God, or anti-creation, where I can destroy at free will.
Yeah.
As much as I can create. Yes, you're free, go do it. It's exactly what you're describing. There is zero responsibility and zero accountability in that fallacy. Okay? Real freedom lies in being able to choose that I'm not going to do something, or I'm going to do something because it brings about good, not only in me, but in the people around me.
Yeah. And
Okay.
if you're not aware of that, then eventually there is sunk cost fallacy where you actually, because I've behaved so badly just like the previous year, might as well like go for another, and
Yeah.
then and then it creates this self-perpetuating
The
system.
ultimate cost is life itself, isn't it?
Yeah. And I was thinking about this concept of sin. It's like it's such a destroyer that it destroys the host itself and then eventually just eats itself up. Like that's
You 100%. For me, yes, it is about self-consumption, um, and that's the beauty of being truly free, of being able to choose to do something not because it makes you feel good or because someone else says it's the right thing, but because in your innermost being as a human being, you identify value
yeah.
in that, and you
Yes.
make the choice to engage in that practice,
Yeah.
even though the consequences mean hardship for you,
Yes.
because you've actually got to a point of self-identification, and hopefully you have a spiritual identification in that as well.
Yo. It matters what we do every
It
day.
matters. It matters what we say. It matters what we do. It matters what we think. And we are created like that. We're created to own that.
And so when you say it matters what we think, I'm like just going, and that's really why we're here. Is that like there's this lack of awareness that I like, you know. I mean, it does sometimes. Like I go like my own brain. I just go like, oh, it's like I just want a break because I just want
It's
a
too
little bit of
intense.
a break. But I'm so grateful that like it is constantly working like that. There are experiences that I have, and there are thoughts that I have that make the world so much more vivid for me. Like and at least I can, I'm aware. I can say, yeah, like even if I did that and I knew, like I have this awareness that enables me to like make choices and live with consequences and be accountable, and like it shapes your, if it's not your actions, it's your reactions, like okay, cool, okay, this is, I've gone this far, okay, I know now I need to like I need to reshape my life because this road I'm going on is not going to lead to a good place, rather than just like, oh, just whatever, we're just going. um but yeah, sometimes you go the other way where you like just overthinking really.
Yes.
And there's nothing there, you're just going like because you just can, and that just makes you very tired.
Well,
But
when your brain consumes your thought process, it's not allowing your body to respond. You feel passion in your chest. You feel instinct in your stomach. And if you're permanently up in the prefrontal lobe, busy thinking about something, you're not allowing your heart to actually communicate its passion on the subject,
yeah,
or your stomach to talk about its instinct of inherited experience. So it becomes, and that's where the headaches come from, because you're like over concentrating.
yeah,
And
and life is to be
over-applying.
lived, not
Yes,
thought.
right. And you see that is where, for me, the idea of thinking is the start process. Then we action it. We write it down, create something,
Yeah.
etc. And in that actioning, there is a verbalization. So we
Yeah.
speak, okay? And that brings about meaning to what was originally a thought.
Yes.
Okay, but you and I know we've grown up in this world where the power of the tongue is immense.
Yeah.
So being aware of what we're saying requires us to be aware of what we're thinking. Okay, but as you've already touched on, being permanently up in that prefrontal brain is not healthy.
It's not healthy.
Because
no.
there's a passion that God's given you that needs to be embraced, that thought process.
Yeah.
Okay, there's an instinct that you have received through your water of your ancestors.
Yeah.
Okay, that needs to work with that, because what was instinctually applicable 200 years ago got almost zero meaning today.
Yeah.
There are cases, but then there are cases where it was applicable
is.
200 years ago. It's very applicable today. So, and if we don't allow what are considered in some circles the other two brains to actually participate in our processing, we become very top-heavy, literally.
Yeah. And do you think, well, I'm starting to think now that like maybe it's healthy to create like pockets in your life where you think, you use time to think, you solidify an idea, you write it down, and then you get practical about it and you apply your heart and you apply your instincts to it. Because if you just leave it up there and it just continues to simmer, it will progress. It will The thought will become greater and greater and greater, and you add to it, and then you won't even know where to begin to action that final thought. But if you start with it as from a small idea, right? And you plan it out, you take those actions, you reach those goals, and then you go back and you think about it again, reflect, and then it reaches a higher point.
You're describing the rumination path, okay? How I literally go and hamper on the same subject and go, and if I don't deal with it, subconsciously almost, it gets constantly reminded, because internally your spirit is saying you need to deal with this. There's the opposite of that, where you look at the idea and you go, that's not for me. And you file 13 it, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then nothing happens. It can be for days, weeks, it can be for months,
Yeah.
it can be for years, decades. And suddenly the thought comes back and you've realized you've done nothing with it. Okay? And that brings about a whole different form of rumination, because there's potential guilt, shame, issues that start climbing in on board. And it's not about, for me, I've got to be very cautious about this. It's not permanently about being in my head. You've touched on it nicely. It's about taking an idea, and whether I journal it or whether I draw a picture or make something that expresses that idea.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be the written word. It can be an expression. It could be reciting a poem about the subject.
Yeah.
It's some form of expression that allows the thought to become physical. Because while it's up in the brain, it's ether.
Yeah.
It's just, where's it? You can't point to it. But if I've journaled, or I've made a sculpture, or I've written a poem and recited a poem, I've actually given it shape.
Yes.
It's not permanent.
Yeah.
It mustn't be permanent, because it's a starting of a growth process.
To.
And that's where the critical thinking comes in. It says, okay, I got the idea, but like, how do I turn this around? And do I have to turn it around in the environment that I'm actually in, that I'm accustomed to being in? Can I go and challenge myself and put that idea in an environment that I'm not used to?
And it's important to action the tiniest of the idea,
Right.
before it grows into a big, unmanageable
Exactly.
dream. So if I start off, I want to learn how to write. Okay, I need to just do that. Write a small little book, right? And then go, and reflect on that book, and then start to write 400 pages, start to write 3,000 words, pages, or whatever. Like, just progress with the idea. Or just have the idea in your head, never take any small steps, and it brews into this big idea. Now you're sitting with this frustration, with this frustration of actions that didn't happen, and now you have this big idea that requires big steps, right? But you can't take those big steps, because action needs to start with small steps. You can't just leap from 0 to a 4,000 page book, if it even exists. But because you can get there. Your thought doesn't stop. It keeps going. The idea keeps evolving, and it becomes bigger and bigger. And if you didn't make small practical steps to achieve that, you are left with a big idea, and you can't even reach it, and it creates frustration.
I'll give you an example of what you've just described. Totally, it's almost abstract in its nature. You've heard of Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien.
Yes.
Okay. By the
Wasn't
way, he was born in Bloemfontein. Yeah, he's a South African. Yeah, I'm proudly South African.
Yeah.
Only 4 years in the country, but that's fine. He's still South African.
Yeah.
No, born in Bloemfontein, and everyone thinks he wrote The Lord of the Rings. I say everyone. I think a large number of the population would presume that the Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and Silmarillion and the myriad of other books he wrote were all written in a certain time frame.
Mm.
He started the concept of Middle Earth as bedtime stories for his children. Okay?
Yeah.
There was an idea that he vocalized to his children.
Yeah.
Okay? And then he realized that there was something there, and he started writing it down.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just the Lord of the Rings or just the story. He was just writing down stories that he was creating.
Yeah.
Okay? And it was only later that he started compiling and going, okay, to finish the Lord of the Rings, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, I've got to do the next thing. And moving in and letting that grow and being very critical about the process of how he wrote it.
Yeah.
You know, it is a fantastical story that has a multi-millennial history. Now, I'm sorry, but you go to Harry Potter, and no disrespect to J.K. Rowling, it's an incredible story.
Yeah.
But she doesn't have the history of Hogwarts and the magic and all the rest. Okay, but you go to Tolkien, and you read stories that don't even or are so distant from the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit, which are the big famous ones. But that's because he created all of that. Okay, and he allowed that creative process, that critical thinking. And some people know this, but he started writing a sequel to Lord of the Rings, okay, where the idea was of a manifestation of a new evil power, and etc. Okay, and while the concept is Mesopotamian in its nature, meaning two superpowers equal weight trying to take each other on, which is a misconception of our world. He eventually discarded it because
meaning God is stronger.
Yes, absolutely.
Way stronger.
Absolutely. There's no equality in that fight. Okay, none whatsoever.
Yes.
But he then said, no, I'm not going to take this further, because Lord of the Rings was about a finality, a conclusion.
Yes.
And I don't need to break that conclusion just for the sake of a story. That's where critical thinking actually empowers us. Because, yes, there's part of us that, I'd love to have known what happened in the next story.
Yeah.
But that's just the inquisitive mind.
Yes.
Okay? That's just the curious mind going, what if?
Sometimes you got to tame the beast.
Right. You got to be able to turn around and say, we've got the story.
Yeah.
We've got the idea. We've got the messages. Okay? So let's enjoy that.
Yeah.
All right? And that is what this is all about, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's about being able to look at ourselves and grow in ourselves and learn from ourselves when to push further and when to hold back and when to just sit and engage and enjoy.
Yeah.
Okay. It sounds crazy. You're a Christian. You believe in Lord of the Rings. I don't believe in it. I love reading it, because there's a million messages in it, okay?
Yeah.
And yes, they are Mesopotamian in their nature, meaning there's a superpower of good and there's a superpower of evil, and they're going to conflict, and there's a chance that one of them could win.
Yes.
Okay? Which goes totally against our faith.
Against our faith.
Because our faith is about a supreme being. That's it.
Yeah.
There's no conflict.
In a story.
All right. So anyway, sorry.
I would like to touch on a subject that's a little bit somber, if that's all right.
You're welcome to.
Loss.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, lately, I've lost a friend and a cousin to suicide. And these made me realize something about loss. And if I distinctly remember, I was just like lying down, looking at the ceiling, and I remember just having this almost getting recited to me, you know? And I was like, let me just write this down. And I'm glad I did. So I'm going to read it. And I think the reason why I want to read this and I want us to talk about it is because I want to highlight the value of people and highlight the value of grief and allowing it to do its work. And also just so people are aware of what happens when you lose someone or lose something, because I don't want to only apply it to losing people that you love, but also like things that you valued, a job or like a car or like potential career or something like that. Okay, so it goes. When we lose someone, we lose their unique ideas and perspectives. We lose our version of them, the image we held in our minds. No one mirrors their mannerisms anymore. The future we envisioned with them disappears. A part of our imagination for life shared with them fades. Generations lose habits and traits they have passed on. Right? Qualities that could have been observed, mimicked, and carried forward. Their essence only survives through what we remember and embody. But even that is that a final evolution of who they are when they pass. It could have gotten better, but we can't know that. We can't experience that. And what about who they could have been, right? That's what I was just saying now. They're still discovering themselves, crafting their identity by mimicking others, blending traits to create their own perfect mix. When we lose a person, we lose all they were and all they were yet to become. And it ties in with what you were saying about the instinctual, you know? And there's this study with Americans and how they sing, and it was said that you feel like they feel the hurt and they sing from that place as if they experienced it, but they did not. And it when like an American, like a black church American woman sings, you like, gosh, like you just feel it. Like there's this and apparently it comes from the pain that they were singing from, and it's been just passed down in that way. Like I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying it's deep. So
it is deep, and it is very pertinent. You've touched on a subject which I think many people glance over from my experience in dealing with people dealing with grief, my own personal grief. When my mom passed away 18 months ago, I had a very close connection with her, and there was a great sense of loss. And I sort of like closed the chapter on my mother's achievements because she was an international academic and a relatively what the world would consider an obscure subject, okay, but a very important one, a very pertinent one, and detrimentally ignored by a lot of academic institutions, from my opinion, okay. And that's it. Enough about that. The loss is that there are very few people in the world that actually lived that knowledge. Okay, my mom being one of them, and it's what she studied orality literacy studies, but functionally how we pass on knowledge without the written word. Because writing is a relatively new skill to the human race.
Yes.
Okay. And so knowledge was passed on verbally. Story. Okay.
Yeah.
And whether we look at the Sangomas around South Africa, we look at the shaman of North America, of Northern Europe and North America, the Inuits or South America, in the indigenous peoples, all the aboriginals of the Pacifics. It is story is how knowledge was passed on and maintained. Okay, and you think, well, the story got lost. Yes, story grows, doesn't lose. It grows, and I'll tell you this much: there is records that there are people in Northwest Africa who are illiterate, yet they can recite the book of Genesis. They've never read the book, but it's been shared to them in oral language, and they've recorded it orally, and they still tell the story. Okay.
It sort of affirms what's been inscribed in their hearts, and
Well, it is part of our DNA, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you want to go down that road of understanding that Yahweh is encoded in our DNA, consequently, the Holy Spirit is actually part of us. It's not just this spiritual being that floats into us because we say, welcome. It's because God's breathed it into us. And it exists there. We've just got to recognize it and embrace it. Yeah. That's my opinion. It's not about come into me. No, you're here. I've got to recognize that you're here. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
You could say it's like the mechanical power that, like when he goes, what's in there?
That's the breath. That's the breath. Yeah. Okay, and being able to recognize that knowledge. We are in our westernized society. We are so tied up in writing things down or recording things in a verbal form. Okay, in the new age of the digital media and social media, that has taken a videographic format. Okay. Look at the food I'm eating. I'm here on the bridge, the selfies, this type of thing, this environment, okay? Yeah. But this is all about expression of knowledge and sharing of knowledge, okay? And while there is that loss that you so beautifully describe, okay, there is also a growth that takes place, okay? I can talk with love about my mother's academic structures and what she did in devotion, even though I tore my hair out as a teenager watching her write her doctorate, okay, and doing her masters and in multiple different subjects, and the ludicrous amount of hours she spent studying and reading and then writing and thinking about how to process things and consulting with people and bringing all this incredible knowledge together. When she passed away, I spent 7 weeks clearing out her library. It was, I'm not joking, 7 of those metal drop file cabinets, like 4 drawers, with 7 of them packed with notes, photocopies, everything. Yeah. Now, she hadn't looked at them in 5 to 7 years, 10 years, okay, because it was all in her brain. It was all part of her collective knowledge, okay.
And she's, like you were saying, she's gathered the wealth of knowledge. It's in her head, and she's adding to it's making sense, and it's
and like, she's sharing that with other people,
and it's probably evolved that she's sharing
it right, well. and the number of people who wrote their doctorates under her supervision over some really weird subjects, okay, but they're weird to me because they really don't interest me. But to those individuals, it's absolute life-giving blood.
And that's so beautiful.
It is. Yeah. It's incredibly beautiful. I sit and I watch you do this whole idea coming out. That is growth. That is beauty in itself. And it comes about because you've actually thought about it and said, I heard you say in your last podcast, hell, just do it.
Just do it.
Be Nike. Just do it, to take a brand. Just do it. Okay? Yes, just do it. And yes, we've got to compensatory to recognize that we're not the only human beings doing these things. That there are other people, that we've got to accredit them for their knowledge and not claim it for ourselves. Okay, but grow our knowledge. So that we can share it, so that the youth around us, the children around us, see that to be critical, as in to ask a question, not to find fault. To ask a question is actually healthy.
And you should be allowed to. Can I interest you in a story?
Sure.
And I mean, if I met this man, I would have absolutely. I think he's like amazing. I had this like tumultuous relationship with this teacher in my school, right? So, the first time we meet, he comes into the class. I'm in grade 10. I'm doing physics. So I'm in a physics class, and he's my physics teacher. He's new to the school. He's starting, and I love you, bro. And then he goes to the class and he's going, a mile is made up of 1,000,000 kilometers. I remember just going, no, it's not. And I mean, I don't know why that was even relevant in the physics class at that stage, because we're supposed to have learned this like a while ago. But like everyone agrees with this, and I'm like, no, it's not. And like, but like, I was a little bit like maybe like rude about it. Like, like I was a kid, but I was going, nah, bro, that's not it. Like, what are you talking about? Like, it can't be. Are you serious? Like that. And I think for a teacher, you just starting, and it might have even been nerves that made him say that. Or like, but and the class was just going, yeah, it's like that. I'm like, no, it's not. And he chased me out of the class. Like it was that bad that he chased me out of the class, and I didn't attend his class until matric. So from grade 10 till grade 12, when he walked in, I would walk out because we had that whole disagreement. But I'm glad I did this, and I'm so thankful for the Holy Spirit and God, because towards the end, like in matric, I mean, firstly, I just felt like I needed the guy because was
It's
not gonna
matric.
make it.
It's matric.
But I also just felt in my heart and spirit just going like resolve things with this person. And I went up to him and I was like, "Yo, look, I'm sorry that we started off on a bad whatever," and you know, we made it work, and we actually started to get along, and I learned from him, and I succeeded in matric. I passed, and I passed the subject. But like, I just remember thinking, had I not stood up and gone, maybe I would have eventually believed that a mile is made up of 1,000,000 kilometers. And then I hope that that class went home and like looked this up. And then you have to wonder, how many other things are we being misinformed with, whether it's by a nervous teacher or they just simply don't know. I mean, like, it's possible. He's also human. Like, maybe he just didn't know. And some random kid named Rick knew
And the
this.
famous subject you mentioned earlier on, their worldview is totally different to
Yes,
yours.
to mine. And so, like, I'm glad I had the what do you call it?
The gumph.
Yes, to like go, no, bro, like this ain't it. And I'm hoping that all the other students went home and like did their own research after that, because I mean, we all know mile is like just over
We don't
1.6
know
or
what the
something.
rest of the lesson was about, do you?
Yeah. So I don't. So it's important that we ask questions, and it should be allowed. A child should be allowed to like ask, okay, I know this is like this, but have we thought about it in this way? Or like, what does it look like when these things are involved? And that helps you, even if you finally accept the information that was given to you initially, but you have full conviction because all the wonderings and questions in your head have been answered.
I think it boils down to the idea that a child needs to learn that a question is not interrogate you to find right or wrong. A question is about finding knowledge. And we grow up in a world, I did, where you weren't allowed to ask questions for knowledge. If you were asked questions, it was to catch you out or find out what you'd done wrong or something. It was interrogatory for the wrong reasons. And I think that's something we've got to pass on to our fellow human beings, children or other, is that a question is not necessarily to find fault, but rather is to gain knowledge. Yes. Gain data, gain information, so that we can process correctly.
Yes. And how confident are you when you have a full, broad understanding of a subject? Even if I ask you now, but what about this? You're not going to be like, I asked the necessary questions at the time that I can go, no, buddy, here's how it is. From that question that you're asking me, here's how it is. And then you ask another one, I go, here's how that angle is, and here's how that, because you're going to be asked these questions by individuals with different experiences. Like you said, if someone from Umlazi asks me a question about maybe a certain subject, they have a different angle. Like, let's say the information is this microphone. If you're looking from that end, you seeing those words that are on there, this person is seeing this tribe, this person is seeing, doesn't make it all incorrect, but it makes it all different angles.
And that's what critical thinking about is about seeking the truth and learning to express it in multiple different ways.
Yes. Ooh, I love that. That was like a nail on the... Okay, let's see. What would you like to like?
For me personally, Ricardo, is firstly thank you, and just to pay tribute to Dr. Richard Paul and Dr. Linda Elder. A lot of my thoughts about critical thinking come out of their foundation.
Yes.
and the books I've read. So we've got to give credit where credit is due. And yeah, just for people to open the mind. You're not going to like it.
Yeah.
It's going to be frightening sometimes. But we've got God, and with God we can discern it correctly, and we can start using it and growing so that the loss we experience and the grief you spoke about is not loss, but rather a growth and a forward movement. Because ultimately, when our spirit does go back to God, we're going to see all of that all over again.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, and those words are so beautiful. Like, it's not loss, it's growth. And seeing it like that, seeing all of the things that are entailed in losing a job or a person you love or anything like that, you can start to realize what is being detached from you, and then you can start to like take steps to like mend that and heal, you know, as soon as you understand. If you look at it from a one-dimensional point of view, I've just lost a person, but not looking at I have lost the vision I had for life with that person. I maybe planned to go to Cape Town with my friend on our motorcycles. That vision has to now, I have to mend that part of my heart to let go of that vision that I had with
Or
that
grow
person.
it to doing it without them and celebration.
Yes.
That's
And
another way of looking at it.
yes, and like realizing all of those things helps you heal, helps you understand the situation better, and helps you move forward in life. So thank you so much, Brenden.
Thank you, Ricardo. This has been awesome.
This was awesome. I'm sure you're gonna do this again. And
Name the
we'll just
time, let's make
expand
the
more.
bunny.
Yes. I love that. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.